Elizabeth Mason stood at the kitchen window of her Westchester County home, watching the November rain trace patterns on the glass. The pristine marble countertops and high-end appliances surrounding her painted a picture of domestic perfection, but beneath the polished surface, hairline cracks were beginning to show. "Mommy, look what I made!" 5-year-old Emma's voice rang through the kitchen as she proudly held up a string of paper hearts, her small fingers carefully gripping her creation. Elizabeth turned from the window, pushing aside her worried thoughts to focus on her daughter's beaming face. "They're beautiful, sweetheart," Elizabeth said, kneeling to examine the hearts. She noticed Emma's hands trembling slightly as she held them up, a subtle sign that something wasn't quite right. It was the third time this week she'd noticed these tremors, each instant sending a spike of concern through her chest. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway drew Elizabeth's attention. Arthur's sleek black Mercedes purred to a stop, and through the rain-streaked window she could make out 2 figures in the car. Her husband wasn't alone. Again. "Emma, honey, why don't you go put your hearts on the refrigerator? We can show Daddy when he comes in." Elizabeth's voice remained steady, practiced in the art of masking her emotions. As Emma skipped away, Elizabeth watched Arthur lingering in the car with his assistant Samantha Reed. Their heads were close together, likely discussing urgent business matters, as Arthur always claimed. Elizabeth's stomach churned as she observed their intimate posture, the way Samantha's hand briefly touched Arthur's arm before he finally stepped out into the rain. The front door opened moments later, bringing with it a gust of cold air and Arthur's commanding presence. "Sorry I'm late," he called out, his voice carrying that familiar note of distraction. "Board meeting ran long." Elizabeth bit back the words she wanted to say. She'd seen him leave the office hours ago through the company's social media updates about their quarterly meeting. Instead, she forced a smile. "Emma's been waiting to show you something." "Daddy!" Emma ran to Arthur, who caught her with one arm while checking his phone with the other. "Look at my hearts." "That's nice, princess," he muttered, barely glancing at the paper creation. "Elizabeth, did you confirm our dinner reservation for Saturday? The Carmichaels are expecting us." Elizabeth felt her jaw tighten. "I had to cancel. Emma's had those tremors again, and I made an appointment with Dr. Richards for Saturday morning." This finally caught Arthur's attention. He lowered his phone, frowning. "Cancel it. This dinner is important. The Carmichaels are key investors. Emma's probably just excited about starting kindergarten. Kids get nervous." "She's been tired too, Arthur, and the bruises on her legs aren't normal." Elizabeth kept her voice low, conscious of Emma arranging her hearts on the refrigerator nearby. "You're overreacting," Arthur dismissed, loosening his tie. "She's fine, just needs more sleep maybe, less coddling." Emma's small voice interrupted their tension. "Daddy, my hands are shaking again." She held them out, and this time the tremors were unmistakable, her little fingers quivering like leaves in a storm. For a brief moment, concern flickered across Arthur's face, but his phone buzzed, drawing his attention away. A text message lit up the screen. Elizabeth caught a glimpse of Samantha's name before Arthur turned away. "We'll discuss this later," he said, heading toward his home office. "I have calls to make." Elizabeth watched him go, then turned to Emma, who stood looking at her own trembling hands with confusion in her big brown eyes. "Come here, baby," Elizabeth whispered, pulling her daughter close. "Everything's going to be okay." That night, after tucking Emma into bed, Elizabeth sat at her computer, researching symptoms long into the quiet hours. Each search result added to the knot of fear in her stomach. When she finally heard Arthur's office door open around midnight, she quickly closed the browser. He passed by without entering their bedroom, heading straight for the guest room, his frequent choice lately. Elizabeth listened to his footsteps fade, then opened her browser again, this time to check their joint bank accounts. The balance had dropped significantly since last week, with several large withdrawals at upscale restaurants and hotels where no business meetings had been scheduled. Her phone lit up with a text from her father, Robert, checking in from Chicago. "How are my girls?" he asked. Elizabeth stared at the message, tears finally breaking free. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered telling him everything: the symptoms, the affairs, the lies. Instead, she replied with a simple, "We're fine, Dad. Love you." But they weren't fine. The next morning, as Elizabeth helped Emma dress for school, she noticed more bruises on her daughter's legs, appearing without any falls or injuries to explain them. Emma moved more slowly than usual, her normally boundless energy subdued. "Mommy, I'm tired," Emma whispered as Elizabeth braided her hair. "Can I stay home today?" The question broke something in Elizabeth's heart. She gathered Emma into her arms, feeling the slight fever that had begun to present itself more frequently. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll have a quiet day together." She texted Arthur about Emma staying home, but his response came hours later, a terse, "Handle it. Important meetings all day." Attached was a photo he'd meant for someone else, quickly deleted but not before Elizabeth saw Samantha in an intimate setting, wearing what appeared to be a new diamond bracelet. That evening, Dr. Richards's office called with an opening for the next morning. As Elizabeth hung up the phone, she heard Arthur's car in the driveway. This time, she watched him kiss Samantha goodbye before heading inside. The simple gold band on his left hand caught the streetlight as he waved to his assistant, and Elizabeth felt something shift inside her, a resolve crystallizing in the face of his betrayal. She looked at Emma, curled up on the couch with her favorite blanket, cartoons playing softly on the TV. In that moment, Elizabeth knew their perfect suburban life was built on lies, and her daughter's health couldn't wait for Arthur to remember he was a father first and a CEO second. That night, she made 2 calls, one to Dr. Richards to confirm tomorrow's appointment and one to her father in Chicago. Robert answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting to hear from her. "Dad," she whispered, stepping out onto the back patio where Arthur wouldn't hear, "I need your help." The rain had stopped, leaving behind a clear night sky. As Elizabeth outlined her fears about Emma's health and Arthur's betrayals, stars emerged one by one above her, pinpoints of light breaking through the darkness. Like those stars, clarity began to pierce through her confusion. She would protect Emma, whatever the cost. Inside, she could hear Arthur's voice rising and falling as he talked on the phone, probably to Samantha. Emma's favorite show played in the background, its cheerful theme song a stark contrast to the heavy decisions weighing on Elizabeth's heart. Tomorrow would bring test results and truth, and with them, the end of pretending their perfect life was anything but a carefully constructed lie. The waiting room at Dr. Richards's private practice felt unnaturally quiet as Elizabeth held Emma's small hand in hers. Early morning sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across the plush carpet. Emma dozed in her chair, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest while Elizabeth's mind raced through the events of the previous night. Arthur hadn't come home. His text message at 3 a.m. claimed he was working late with the executive team, but the Instagram story Samantha had briefly posted, and quickly deleted, told a different story. They were in Atlantic City, his arm draped possessively around her waist as they posed in front of a casino's glittering facade. "Emma Mason?" a nurse called softly, breaking through Elizabeth's bitter thoughts. She gently roused Emma, who blinked sleepily as they followed the nurse down a hallway decorated with cheerful underwater scenes. "Good morning, Emma." Dr. Richards greeted them warmly as they entered the examination room. The pediatrician's kind eyes crinkled with genuine affection for her young patient, though Elizabeth noticed a subtle tension in her posture. "I understand you've been feeling extra tired lately?" Emma nodded, clutching her rabbit closer. "My hands keep doing the shaky dance," she demonstrated, holding out her trembling fingers. "And sometimes my legs don't want to run anymore." Dr. Richards conducted a thorough examination, her experienced hands gentle but purposeful, as she checked Emma's lymph nodes and noted the pattern of bruising on her legs. Elizabeth's heart clenched when the doctor's expression grew more serious with each discovery. "I'd like to run some blood tests," Dr. Richards said carefully, meeting Elizabeth's eyes over Emma's head. "And I'm going to call in a colleague from pediatric hematology." The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. Hematology. Blood disorders. Elizabeth felt the room tilt slightly, but forced herself to remain composed for Emma's sake. "Will it hurt?" Emma's voice quavered as a nurse prepared for the blood draw. "Just a tiny pinch, sweetheart," Elizabeth assured her, though her own voice threatened to break. "Like a butterfly landing on your arm." Emma buried her face in Elizabeth's shoulder during the blood draw, whimpering softly. Each small sound pierced Elizabeth's heart like a needle. Where was Arthur? He should be here, holding their daughter's other hand, sharing this burden. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of tests, consultations, and growing certainty that their lives were about to change dramatically. Dr. Richards and her colleague, Dr. Mason, no relation, he'd noted with a kind smile, sat Elizabeth down while Emma dozed on the examination table, exhausted from the morning's procedures. "The preliminary results indicate Fanconi anemia," Dr. Mason explained gently. "It's a rare genetic condition that affects bone marrow function. The tremors, fatigue, and bruising are all consistent with the diagnosis." Elizabeth gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. "What's the treatment plan?" "She'll need regular transfusions, potentially bone marrow transplantation down the line," Dr. Richards interjected. "The good news is that we've caught it relatively early. With proper treatment and monitoring, many children with FA lead full lives, but," she hesitated, "the treatment protocol is intensive and expensive." Elizabeth's phone buzzed insistently, Arthur calling finally. She silenced it without looking. "What's our first step?" As the doctors outlined the treatment plan, Elizabeth's mind worked furiously. Their insurance would cover some costs, but not all. Arthur's company had excellent medical benefits, but accessing them required his cooperation, something he'd shown little interest in lately when it came to family matters. "I'm prescribing some medications to help manage her symptoms for now," Dr. Mason said, writing in Emma's chart. "But we need to begin transfusions within the week. I'll have my office contact you about scheduling." Elizabeth's phone lit up again, this time with a text from her father. "Just checking in. Call me if you need anything." Robert's simple message, so full of genuine concern, contrasted sharply with Arthur's continued absence. After scheduling the first round of treatments, Elizabeth helped a drowsy Emma to the car. As she buckled her daughter into her car seat, Emma's small voice cut through the morning air. "Is Daddy going to come to the hospital with us next time?" Elizabeth's hands froze on the seatbelt. "Would you like him to?" Emma nodded, hugging her rabbit. "He makes funny faces when the doctors talk, like when I had my shots last time." The memory stabbed at Elizabeth's heart. That had been over a year ago, the last time Arthur had attended one of Emma's medical appointments. Before Samantha. Before the late nights and secret hotel stays. Before their perfect life had begun to crack. Driving home, Elizabeth's mind raced. Their house was mortgaged to the hilt, the payments barely manageable even with Arthur's substantial income. The credit cards were nearly maxed out. She'd discovered thousands in charges at high-end jewelry stores and luxury hotels. Arthur had been burning through their savings at an alarming rate, and now Emma needed specialized medical care that would strain their resources even further. She pulled into their driveway, noting Arthur's car was still absent, probably still in Atlantic City, spending money they desperately needed for their daughter's treatment. Emma had fallen asleep in her car seat, clutching her rabbit, her face peaceful despite the morning's ordeal. Elizabeth's phone buzzed with another text from Robert. "Elizabeth, honey, you're worrying me. Please call when you can." Making a decision, she lifted Emma carefully from the car and carried her inside. After settling her daughter on the living room couch with her favorite blanket, Elizabeth retreated to the kitchen and finally called her father. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Emma's sick, really sick. And Arthur." She couldn't continue as the tears finally broke free. Robert's voice came through strong and steady. "Tell me everything, sweetheart." For the next hour, Elizabeth poured out the whole story. Emma's diagnosis, Arthur's affairs, the financial mess he'd created, her growing fears for their future. Robert listened without interruption, his silence supportive rather than judgmental. "The house in Lincoln Park is empty," he said finally, referring to his property in Chicago's affluent neighborhood. "It's yours if you want it." Emma could start treatment at Northwestern's Children's Hospital. They have one of the best pediatric hematology departments in the country. Elizabeth glanced at Emma, still sleeping peacefully on the couch. Arthur would never agree to us moving. From what you've told me, Elizabeth, Arthur gave up his right to make decisions about Emma's welfare a long time ago. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. You need to protect your daughter and yourself. A key turned in the front door. Arthur, finally home from his Atlantic City excursion. Elizabeth quickly ended the call, promising her father she'd think about his offer. Arthur strode into the kitchen, his designer suit wrinkled from travel. Why aren't you answering my calls? And why isn't Emma at school? His voice carried the sharp edge of irritation rather than concern. Elizabeth met his gaze steadily, something shifting inside her as she looked at this man who had once been the center of her world. Emma has Fanconi anemia, she said quietly. She needs immediate medical intervention, expensive medical intervention. Arthur's face went blank, then quickly shifted to dismissive. You're overreacting again. She's fine. Just a bit anemic, maybe. Nothing a few vitamins won't fix. I have the test results, Arthur, and the treatment plan. Elizabeth's voice remained calm, even as rage built inside her. She needs transfusions, possibly a bone marrow transplant. Where were you this morning when they were drawing blood from your crying daughter? He had the grace to look uncomfortable, but his phone buzzed before he could respond. Elizabeth caught Samantha's name on the screen again before he turned away. We'll discuss this later, he muttered, heading for his office. I have a conference call. Elizabeth watched him go, then looked at Emma's peaceful form on the couch. In that moment, her decision crystallized like frost on a winter morning. She wouldn't let Arthur's negligence and infidelity endanger their daughter's life. Quietly, she climbed the stairs to their bedroom and opened her laptop. First, she forwarded all the medical documentation to her personal email. Then she began researching Chicago's Northwestern Memorial Hospital and their pediatric hematology department. Finally, she opened a private browser window and started looking into what she would need to do to protect her rights and Emma's future when she left. Over the next week, Elizabeth moved through her days like a ghost, planning her escape in the quiet moments between Arthur's absences and Emma's naps. Each step required careful consideration. One mistake could unravel everything. The unseasonably warm December morning found Elizabeth in her walk-in closet, methodically sorting through belongings while Emma played in her room down the hall. She'd already opened a separate bank account at a different bank, transferring small amounts daily to avoid attention. The total now stood at just enough to sustain them for a few months, supplemented by the emergency credit card her father had overnight shipped to her office. Mrs. Mason? Maria, their housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. Mr. Mason called. He won't be home for dinner again tonight. Elizabeth nodded, maintaining her composure. Thank you, Maria. You can take the rest of the day off. She'd already arranged for Maria to receive a generous severance payment, scheduled to be delivered after their departure. Once alone, Elizabeth returned to her task, selecting only essential items that wouldn't be immediately missed. Designer handbags and jewelry stayed behind. They were too conspicuous and could be traced. Instead, she focused on practical clothing and irreplaceable mementos. Emma's baby book, family photos from happier times, her grandmother's simple gold locket. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Everything's ready here. Dr. Henderson at Northwestern is expecting your call. Elizabeth allowed herself a moment of gratitude for her father's efficiency. He'd already arranged for Emma's medical records to be transferred, secured appointments with specialists, and prepared the Lincoln Park house for their arrival. The property's security system had been upgraded, and he'd hired a discreet private security firm to monitor the premises, a precaution that felt necessary given Arthur's unpredictable nature. Mommy, Emma's voice drifted from her bedroom. Can you help me find Bunny? Elizabeth found her daughter searching under her bed for the beloved stuffed rabbit. Here, sweetheart, she said, spotting it behind a pillow. Why don't we pack Bunny and some other friends for our special trip? Emma's eyes lit up. Elizabeth had prepared her for their departure by framing it as an exciting adventure to visit Grandpa Robert. Can I bring my tea party set? We'll need to pack light, baby. Just your favorite things. Elizabeth helped Emma select a few cherished toys, carefully avoiding any mentions of the permanence of their move. That afternoon, while Emma napped, Elizabeth met with her lawyer in a coffee shop 3 towns over. The manila envelope she received contained everything she needed: temporary custody papers, documentation of Arthur's financial irregularities, and evidence of his affair with Samantha collected by a private investigator. The police have been notified about Emma's condition, her lawyer confirmed quietly. If he tries to claim kidnapping, they'll understand this was for her medical necessity. And with the evidence of his negligence and infidelity, no judge will fault you for leaving. Elizabeth signed the necessary papers with a steady hand, her wedding ring catching the light one last time before she slipped it off and tucked it into her pocket. What about the house, the accounts? The court will sort that out later. Right now, focus on getting Emma to her medical appointments. That's your legal and moral priority. Returning home, Elizabeth found another text from Arthur. Working late, don't wait up. The dismissive message strengthened her resolve. She'd scheduled Emma's first treatment at Northwestern for next week. Arthur didn't even know about it. The next morning, Elizabeth dropped Emma at school as usual, then began the final phase of her plan. She visited 3 different shipping stores in neighboring towns, sending small boxes of their essential belongings to her father's Chicago address under her maiden name. Each package was carefully labeled as household goods, nothing to draw attention. At the bank, she withdrew the maximum daily limit from the ATM, then visited a branch in another town to close a small, separate account Arthur knew nothing about. The teller's eyes widened at her request for cash, but Elizabeth's prepared story about buying antiques for her father's birthday deflected suspicion. Back home, she packed their remaining essentials into 2 ordinary suitcases, the kind you'd take for a weekend visit to Grandpa's house. Emma's medical documents and Elizabeth's crucial papers were secured in her laptop bag, along with a burner phone Robert had suggested she purchase. That evening, Arthur actually came home for dinner, though his attention remained fixed on his phone. Elizabeth served his favorite meal, playing the role of devoted wife one last time. Emma chatted happily about school, while Elizabeth silently photographed the scene with her mind, the last dinner in what had once been their dream home. The Carmichaels invited us to their holiday party next weekend, Arthur mentioned between bites. Wear that blue dress Samantha helped you pick out. Elizabeth's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The dress had been an obvious power play, Samantha choosing something a size too small, presented with a serpentine smile. I have other plans that weekend, she replied calmly. Arthur finally looked up from his phone, frowning. Cancel them. This is important for the business. More important than Emma's health? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Not this again, he sighed, pushing away from the table. She's fine. You're being dramatic. He stood, straightening his tie. I need to make some calls. After he disappeared into his office, Emma looked at Elizabeth with worried eyes. Is Daddy mad at us? No, sweetheart. Elizabeth smoothed her daughter's hair. Daddy's just busy. Hey, want to have a special sleepover in Mommy's room tonight? Emma's face lit up. Their occasional girls' nights were her favorite treat. They built a pillow fort on Elizabeth's bed, read stories, and giggled together until Emma drifted off to sleep. Elizabeth lay awake beside her, listening to Arthur's voice rise and fall in his office as he talked to Samantha late into the night. At dawn, Elizabeth gently woke Emma. Ready for our adventure, baby? Emma nodded sleepily, already dressed in the clothes they'd laid out the night before. Elizabeth had timed their departure perfectly. Arthur had taken sleeping pills after his late night and wouldn't wake for hours. They crept downstairs in the gray morning light. Elizabeth had already loaded their suitcases into the car the night before, hidden under a blanket. She'd chosen her practical SUV over Arthur's Mercedes, knowing he could more easily track the luxury car's GPS. As Elizabeth buckled Emma into her car seat, a light flicked on in a neighboring house. She froze, but no one appeared at the windows. The street remained quiet, wrapped in early morning mist. She took one last look at the house, the perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, the elegant facade that had hidden so much pain. Then she slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine. "Mommy!" Emma's voice was thick with sleep. "Did Daddy already leave for work?" Elizabeth's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Daddy's sleeping, sweetheart. We're going to let him rest while we start our adventure. Remember what we talked about? We're going to visit Grandpa Robert for a while." "Because I need special medicine?" "That's right, baby. The doctors in Chicago are going to help you feel better." Elizabeth backed out of the driveway, her movements deliberate and calm despite her racing heart. As they turned onto the main road, Emma clutched Bunny close. "Will Daddy come visit us?" Elizabeth checked the rearview mirror, making sure no familiar cars were following. "We'll see, sweetheart. Right now, let's play our favorite game. Who can spot the most red cars?" As Emma began scanning the early morning traffic, Elizabeth merged onto the highway heading west. She'd mapped multiple routes to Chicago, planning to take the least obvious path. Her burner phone held Robert's number and her lawyer's, while her regular phone was turned off and stowed in her bag. She'd activate it once they were safely in Chicago, letting Arthur wonder and worry just as she had so many nights before. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of promise as they drove away from their old life. In the back seat, Emma had drifted off to sleep again, Bunny tucked securely under her chin. Elizabeth glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, then pressed the accelerator a little harder. They had a long drive ahead of them, but for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt like she could breathe freely. Behind them lay a perfect facade hiding a crumbling foundation. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also hope, and most importantly, the medical care Emma desperately needed. Elizabeth reached over and turned on the radio, keeping the volume low. As a familiar song played softly through the speakers, she allowed herself a small smile. By the time Arthur woke up, they would be halfway to Chicago, leaving behind nothing but a short note on his desk. "Emma needs more than your money. She needs a father who cares. We'll be in touch through my lawyer." The Chicago skyline emerged through the winter haze as Elizabeth guided her SUV along Lakeshore Drive. After 14 hours of careful driving, taking back roads and making strategic stops, they were finally approaching their destination. Emma had been remarkably patient throughout the journey, content with audiobooks and small travel games, though her increasing fatigue was evident. "Look, sweetheart," Elizabeth pointed through the windshield. "There's Grandpa Robert's city." Emma pressed her face against the window, eyes wide at the towering buildings. "They're like giant Christmas trees," she exclaimed, pointing at the early evening lights beginning to twinkle in office windows. Elizabeth's burner phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Security team confirms no unusual activity. All clear at the house. I'm here waiting." The Lincoln Park neighborhood welcomed them with tree-lined streets and historic brownstones. Elizabeth followed Robert's directions, turning onto a quiet street where her father's property sat back from the road, protected by a tasteful but robust security gate. As they pulled into the driveway, Robert emerged from the front door, his familiar silhouette bringing tears to Elizabeth's eyes. "There are my girls," Robert called out, hurrying down the steps despite the December chill. He opened Emma's door first, unbuckling his granddaughter with practiced ease. "How's my favorite explorer?" "Grandpa." Emma's exhaustion momentarily vanished as she threw her arms around his neck. "We saw 3 different states today." Elizabeth stepped out of the car on shaky legs, the stress of their journey finally catching up with her. Robert shifted Emma to one arm and pulled his daughter close with the other. "You made it," he whispered. "You're safe now." The house was warm and welcoming, already prepared for their arrival. The furniture Elizabeth remembered from childhood visits had been updated, but the overall feeling of security remained the same. A Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, and delicious smells wafted from the kitchen. "Mrs. Chen from next door brought over dinner," Robert explained, setting Emma down. "And the kitchen's fully stocked. The security team did a complete sweep this afternoon. Everything's secure." Elizabeth nodded gratefully, watching Emma explore the space with curious eyes. "Has there been any—" "Nothing yet," Robert interrupted gently. "But we're prepared. Your lawyer called. All the paperwork is in order." and Dr. Henderson's office confirmed Emma's appointment for tomorrow morning. The mention of the appointment brought Elizabeth back to their immediate priorities. Emma was moving more slowly now, the long day taking its toll. "Bath time, sweetheart? Then we can have some of Mrs. Chen's dinner." While Robert brought in their bags, Elizabeth helped Emma with her bath in the upstairs bathroom that had been specially prepared with child-friendly supplies. The familiar routine helped settle both their nerves, though Elizabeth noticed Emma's hands trembling more than usual as she tried to hold her bath toys. "Mommy?" Emma's voice was small as Elizabeth helped her into clean pajamas. "Are we going to live with Grandpa forever?" Elizabeth sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Emma into her lap. "We're going to stay here while the special doctors help you feel better, and Grandpa's going to help take care of us." "But what about Daddy? Won't he be lonely?" The question pierced Elizabeth's heart. Daddy needs to focus on some grown-up things right now. But you don't need to worry about that. Your job is to get stronger, okay?" Emma nodded against her chest, clearly too tired to pursue the subject further. They made their way downstairs where Robert had set the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen's famous dumplings and soup. Emma managed a few bites before her eyes began to droop. "I'll take her up," Robert offered, lifting his granddaughter with gentle care. "You should eat something, Elizabeth. Tomorrow will be a long day." Once Emma was settled in her new room, complete with star-shaped nightlight and Bunny tucked safely beside her, Elizabeth finally allowed herself to check her regular phone. 27 missed calls from Arthur, 15 voice messages, dozens of texts ranging from confused to angry to threatening. The most recent message made her blood run cold. "I've called the police. You can't take my daughter without my permission. I'll find you." Robert returned to find Elizabeth staring at her phone, hands shaking. Without a word, he took the device, powered it down, and placed it in a drawer. "The police already have the documentation from your lawyer," he reminded her. "And the security team is monitoring everything. He can't touch you here." "He's never been like this before," Elizabeth whispered. "So aggressive." "Money and power can change people," Robert said quietly, sitting beside her. "But losing them can reveal who they truly are." He pushed the container of dumplings closer. "Eat. You need your strength." As they ate, Robert outlined the security measures he'd put in place. The property was equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance. The security team included former law enforcement officers. The neighbors, particularly Mrs. Chen, a retired judge, were aware of the situation and would alert them to any suspicious activity. "Northwestern's Children's Hospital has also been briefed," he added. "They have protocols for situations like this. No one will be allowed near Emma without proper authorization." Elizabeth nodded, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "I should review her medical files again before tomorrow's appointment." "Already done," Robert smiled, sliding a folder across the table. "I had my assistant organize everything chronologically, with the most recent tests on top. Dr. Henderson's preliminary treatment plan is included." Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes as she opened the folder. "Dad, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," he interrupted firmly. "You're my daughter, and Emma's my granddaughter. This is what family does, real family." Later that night, after reviewing the medical documents and taking a much-needed shower, Elizabeth stood in the doorway of Emma's room, watching her daughter sleep. The bedroom had been perfectly prepared for a 5-year-old girl, with soft purple walls and twinkling string lights creating a cozy atmosphere. Emma looked peaceful, her breathing steady, though Elizabeth noted the pallor of her skin under the gentle light. A noise from the street drew her attention. Elizabeth moved to the window, her heart racing, but it was just a neighbor walking their dog. The security guard stationed at the gate gave the neighbor a friendly wave, alert but not obvious. Robert appeared beside her, offering a cup of chamomile tea. "The security cameras have night vision," he said quietly. "And I've installed motion sensors around the entire property. Try to get some sleep, honey. You're home now." Elizabeth accepted the tea, letting its warmth seep into her cold hands. Home. The word felt strange after so many months of feeling like a stranger in her own house. But here, in her father's home, with Emma sleeping safely nearby and real help finally within reach, she felt the first stirrings of peace. Her phone remained silent in the drawer downstairs, but she knew Arthur wouldn't stay quiet for long. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Emma's first appointment at Northwestern, potential legal battles, the reality of building a new life from scratch. But for now, in this moment, they were safe. Elizabeth settled into the comfortable chair beside Emma's bed, unwilling to be far from her daughter on their first night in Chicago. Robert had placed a soft blanket and pillow nearby, anticipating her needs as he always had. As she sipped her tea and watched Emma sleep, Elizabeth allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found their way to solid ground at last. Outside, snow began to fall softly over Lincoln Park, covering their tracks and transforming Chicago into a winter wonderland. Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, and Elizabeth reached out to smooth her daughter's hair. "Sweet dreams, my brave girl," she whispered. "Tomorrow is a new beginning for both of us." Northwestern Memorial Hospital's pediatric wing sparkled in the morning light, its modern glass facade a stark contrast to the gray December sky. Elizabeth gripped Emma's hand as they followed Robert through the sliding doors, a security officer from their detail discreetly shadowing their movements. "Look, Mom." Emma pointed excitedly at the massive aquarium in the lobby, momentarily distracted from her nervousness. Tropical fish in brilliant colors drifted peacefully behind the glass, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that seemed designed to soothe young patients. Dr. Henderson's office was on the 4th floor, in a wing dedicated to pediatric hematology. The waiting room walls featured cheerful murals of hot air balloons floating through cloud-dotted skies. Emma immediately gravitated toward a play area where other children were building with magnetic blocks. "Mrs. Mason?" A nurse appeared with a tablet. "We'll need to complete some additional paperwork before seeing Dr. Henderson." While Robert stayed with Emma, Elizabeth followed the nurse to a private consultation room. The questions were extensive, covering not only Emma's medical history but also their current security situation. Elizabeth appreciated the hospital's thoroughness. They clearly took their patients' safety seriously. "We've implemented the security protocols your father requested," the nurse explained, typing notes. "Only pre-approved individuals will be allowed access to Emma's floor during her treatments. We've also flagged her file with an alert about her father." Elizabeth's phone buzzed in her pocket, her new secure phone, not the one Arthur had been calling. It was a text from her lawyer. "Arthur's filed an emergency custody petition in New York. Our Chicago team is preparing the response. Stay where you are." The nurse noticed Elizabeth's hands trembling. "Would you like a moment?" "No." Elizabeth straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready to meet Dr. Henderson." The doctor proved to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of quiet competence. She reviewed Emma's files thoroughly before meeting them, and her questions were precise and thoughtful. "The treatment plan I'm proposing is aggressive," Dr. Henderson explained, spreading charts across her desk. "Emma's condition has progressed more rapidly than we typically see. I'd like to begin transfusions today, followed by a bone marrow compatibility screening for the entire family." "Today?" Elizabeth hadn't expected things to move so quickly. Her latest blood work shows significant deterioration. The sooner we begin, the better her chances for a positive outcome. Dr. Henderson's expression was gentle but firm. "I understand you're dealing with a complicated situation, but Emma's health has to be our priority." Robert squeezed Elizabeth's hand. "We're ready, whatever Emma needs." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Emma was admitted to the pediatric ward, where a cheerful nurse named Michael helped her change into child-sized hospital pajamas decorated with dinosaurs. Elizabeth noticed how he managed to make each medical procedure seem like an adventure, distracting Emma with jokes and stories. "Look, Mom." Emma held up her arm where an IV had been inserted. "Michael says this is my special superhero power line. It's going to make me strong like Captain Marvel." Elizabeth forced a smile, though her heart ached at the sight of the medical equipment surrounding her daughter's bed. Robert had stepped out to coordinate with their security team. Arthur's lawyer had called the hospital demanding information about Emma. You know what else superheroes need? Michael winked at Emma. Super secret hideouts. That's why we're going to give you a special room with a secret code on the door. Only the good guys will know how to get in. Emma's eyes widened with excitement, not realizing this was part of the hospital's security protocol. As Michael began the transfusion, he kept her entertained with elaborate stories about other young superheroes who had gotten their strength back in this very room. Elizabeth's phone buzzed again, another message from her lawyer. Arthur's booked a flight to Chicago. We're filing a restraining order based on his threats. Keep security alert. Mrs. Mason? A social worker appeared in the doorway. Could we speak privately for a moment? In the hallway, the social worker introduced herself as Lauren and explained that the hospital had been contacted by Chicago Child Protective Services. It's standard procedure when there's a custody dispute, she assured Elizabeth. From what I can see, you've done everything right, documenting the medical necessity, working through proper legal channels. We just need to conduct a brief interview. Elizabeth answered Lauren's questions thoroughly, providing copies of Arthur's threatening messages and documentation of his previous neglect of Emma's health issues. The social worker took careful notes, her expression professional but sympathetic. One more thing, Lauren added as they concluded. We've had several calls from reporters asking about your case. Apparently, your husband's position has made this newsworthy. The hospital's privacy protocols are ironclad, but you should be prepared for media attention. Robert returned as Lauren was leaving, his face tight with concern. Arthur's lawyer is demanding a video call with Emma. They're claiming parental alienation. No. Elizabeth's voice was firm. Not today. Not while she's having her first treatment. He didn't care about her health before. He doesn't get to disrupt her treatment now. A commotion at the nurses' station drew their attention. A well-dressed woman was arguing with hospital security, her voice carrying down the hallway. I represent Arthur Mason of Mason Industries. I have a right to verify his daughter's medical condition. Elizabeth recognized the voice. Samantha. Her presence in Chicago meant Arthur wasn't far behind. Robert immediately contacted their security team while Elizabeth hurried back into Emma's room. Her daughter was dozing peacefully, the transfusion nearly complete, Michael still sitting nearby keeping watch. Everything okay? He asked quietly, noting Elizabeth's distress. Could we move Emma to a different room? One less visible from the hallway? Michael nodded, already reaching for his phone. Within minutes, a team arrived to carefully transfer Emma and her equipment to a more secure room on a different floor. Emma barely stirred, exhausted from the treatment. This floor has restricted elevator access, Michael explained as they settled Emma into the new room. And the security office has a direct feed of the hallway cameras. Elizabeth sank into the chair beside Emma's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her daughter's chest. The transfusion bag was nearly empty, the first step in what would be a long journey toward healing. Robert appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Samantha's been escorted out, but she claims Arthur will be here by tonight. The lawyers are rushing the restraining order and hospital security has his photo. He won't get anywhere near Emma. Elizabeth nodded, too drained to speak. The events of the past few days were catching up with her, and the sight of Emma's pale face against the hospital pillows made her heart ache. Why don't you try to rest? Robert suggested. The security team is in place, and I'll stay with Emma. You need to keep up your strength. I can't sleep, Elizabeth whispered. What if he tries to take her? He won't get the chance. Robert's voice was steel. This isn't like New York, where he held all the power. Here, we have the law on our side. Emma's medical needs come first, and he's demonstrated clear neglect. Rest, Elizabeth, let us protect you both for a while. As if sensing her mother's distress, Emma stirred slightly. Mommy? I'm here, baby. Elizabeth moved closer, smoothing Emma's hair. Did I do good at being brave? You did amazing, sweetheart. You're the bravest girl I know. Emma smiled sleepily. Michael says tomorrow I might get to meet other super kids who get special medicine like me. Can I? We'll see how you're feeling, Elizabeth promised, watching as Emma drifted back to sleep. Outside the window, the Chicago skyline was disappearing into evening shadows. Somewhere out there, Arthur was on his way, probably already plotting his next move. But in this moment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully after her first treatment, Elizabeth felt a flicker of hope. They had made the right choice, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Robert quietly pulled a blanket over Elizabeth's shoulders as she maintained her vigil by Emma's bedside. The monitors beeped softly, and distant hospital sounds created a strange lullaby. They had taken the first steps on their new path, and there would be no turning back. The first signs of trouble came at dawn. Elizabeth was dozing in the chair beside Emma's hospital bed when urgent whispers in the hallway jolted her awake. Robert appeared in the doorway, his face tense. "Arthur's downstairs," he said quietly. Hospital security stopped him at the main entrance. "He's with his lawyer." Elizabeth's heart raced as she glanced at Emma, still sleeping peacefully after her first round of treatment. The morning sun cast gentle shadows through the window, creating a deceptively calm atmosphere. "He can't get up here, right?" Elizabeth whispered, moving closer to her daughter's bed. "The floor's locked down," Robert assured her. "But his lawyer is demanding a meeting. They're threatening to go to the media if we don't cooperate." Before Elizabeth could respond, her phone lit up with a message from her lawyer. "Emergency hearing scheduled for 2 p.m. today. Judge Wilson will hear arguments for the restraining order. Stay in the hospital. We're coming to you." Emma stirred, her small face scrunching against the morning light. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Elizabeth pushed aside her fears to focus on her daughter. "Here, sweetheart. Small sips, remember?" She helped Emma with the water, noting how her hand seemed steadier after yesterday's transfusion. Michael, their nurse from yesterday, arrived for the morning checkup. His cheerful demeanor carried an underlying alertness that told Elizabeth he was well aware of the situation downstairs. "How's our superhero this morning?" he asked, checking Emma's vitals. "I heard some other super kids might visit later. They have their own special power lines too." Emma's face lit up, momentarily distracting her from the blood pressure cuff around her arm. "Really? Do they fight bad guys like me?" "You bet they do. And guess what? Dr. Henderson says your numbers are looking better already." Michael winked at Elizabeth as he updated the charts. "The special medicine is working its magic." A commotion erupted in the hallway, raised voices, the sound of rapid footsteps. Robert stepped outside to investigate while Elizabeth moved protectively closer to Emma's bed. "What's happening?" Emma asked, picking up on the tension. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart." Elizabeth forced a smile. "Hey, why don't you show Michael your new drawing?" But before Emma could reach for her sketchbook, Arthur's voice boomed from the hallway. "I have a right to see my daughter." Emma's eyes widened. "Daddy?" Michael moved swiftly to the door, pressing a button that brought 2 security guards running. Robert's voice carried through the chaos. "You need to leave now, Arthur. This is a restricted floor." "Get out of my way, old man." "Elizabeth, I know you're in there." Emma clutched Elizabeth's hand. "Why is Daddy yelling? Is he mad at us?" "No, baby," Elizabeth soothed, though her own hands were shaking. "Daddy's just excited and forgot his inside voice. Remember how we talked about hospital rules?" Michael positioned himself in the doorway while the security guards intercepted Arthur. Through the gap, Elizabeth caught glimpses of her husband, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, his face contorted with rage. "Mr. Mason," one of the guards warned, "if you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to escort you out. This is a pediatric ward with critically ill children." "That's my daughter in there," Arthur's voice cracked. "Elizabeth, you can't do this. You can't take her from me." Robert's response was cold and precise. "You took yourself away, Arthur. When you ignored her symptoms, when you dismissed her needs, when you chose everything else over your own child's health." "You sanctimonious bastard," Arthur snarled. "You turned my wife against me, filled her head with lies." "The only lies here," Elizabeth finally called out, keeping her voice steady for Emma's sake. were the ones you told yourself about being a good father. Emma's grip on Elizabeth's hand tightened. Mommy, I'm scared. The fear in her daughter's voice ignited something fierce in Elizabeth's chest. She kissed Emma's forehead and squeezed her hand. It's okay, baby. Mommy's going to fix this. Then she stepped into the hallway, facing Arthur directly for the first time since their escape. Look at yourself, she said quietly, her voice carrying over his protests. Creating a scene in a children's hospital. Terrifying sick kids. Is this really how you want to prove you're a good father? Arthur fell silent, his face flushing. Behind him, Samantha appeared from the elevator, designer handbag clutched like a shield. Arthur, the press is downstairs. We need to handle this carefully. The press? Elizabeth's laugh was bitter. Of course. That's always been your priority, hasn't it? Image, reputation, status. Well, guess what? While you were building your perfect public image, your daughter was getting sicker. Where were you when she cried through blood draws? When she was too tired to play, when she needed her father? I was working, Arthur protested. Everything I did was for her future. Her future? Elizabeth stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. She might not have had a future if we'd waited any longer. Dr. Henderson says her condition is critical. But you wouldn't know that, because you haven't bothered to speak to her doctors. You haven't even asked about her diagnosis. Arthur's face shifted, uncertainty creeping into his anger. I have my own specialists. No, you have your lawyers, and your PR team, and your girlfriend. Elizabeth glanced at Samantha, who had the grace to look away. Emma has real doctors here, real treatment, real hope. The elevator dinged, and Elizabeth's lawyer emerged with a court officer. Mr. Mason, the officer announced. This is your official notice. Judge Wilson has approved an emergency restraining order. You need to leave the premises immediately. Arthur's lawyer stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. We have a hearing at 2 o'clock. Which you'll attend remotely, the court officer interrupted. The judge has been informed of this incident. She's not impressed with your client's behavior in a pediatric ward. The fight seemed to drain from Arthur as hospital security moved to escort him out. He looked past Elizabeth toward Emma's room, where their daughter was barely visible through the doorway, small and pale against the hospital sheets. Elizabeth, his voice cracked. Please. She's my daughter too. Then start acting like it, Elizabeth replied softly. Get counseling, talk to her doctors. Prove you can put her needs first. But for now, you need to leave. You're scaring her. As Arthur was led away, Samantha lingering uncertainly behind him, Elizabeth felt her knees weaken. Robert caught her arm, supporting her as Michael brought a chair from Emma's room. You did good, Robert murmured. That couldn't have been easy. Elizabeth wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I need to get back to Emma. She must be terrified. But when they returned to the room, they found Michael had worked his magic. He'd turned on Emma's favorite cartoon and was helping her build a fort out of spare blankets, creating a safe cocoon around her bed. Mom, Emma called out. Michael says we can have ice cream for breakfast, because I was extra brave with my medicine. Elizabeth laughed through her tears, crawling into the fort beside her daughter. Ice cream for breakfast? Well, I guess superheroes need special fuel sometimes. As she held Emma close, listening to her chatter about ice cream flavors and superhero powers, Elizabeth felt something shift inside her. The confrontation with Arthur had been painful, but it had also been clarifying. She was no longer the woman who had lived in fear of his disapproval, who had watched silently as he neglected their daughter. Robert brought them both breakfast, ice cream, and proper food, while Michael updated Dr. Henderson about the morning's events. The hospital increased security further, and Elizabeth's lawyer prepared their case for the afternoon hearing. Through it all, Emma remained their center, their reason for everything. Her strength in the face of both her illness and the morning's chaos amazed Elizabeth. Perhaps they had both grown stronger, mother and daughter together, finding courage in each other when they needed it most. Outside the blanket fort, the world continued its complex dance of legal battles and medical treatments. But inside their cozy shelter, Elizabeth held her daughter close and felt, for the first time since leaving New York, absolutely certain that they had made the right choice. The courthouse conference room felt impossibly small as Elizabeth sat between her lawyer and Robert, facing the large video screen where Arthur and his legal team would soon appear. Judge Wilson had ordered a remote hearing after Arthur's outburst at the hospital, a decision that brought both relief and tension to Elizabeth's shoulders. "Remember," her lawyer, Patricia Weber, whispered, "let the medical records speak for themselves. Dr. Henderson's testimony will be crucial." Elizabeth nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her conservative blue dress. She'd left Emma in the capable hands of Michael and a child life specialist at the hospital, promising to return before dinner. The guilt of leaving her daughter, even briefly, gnawed at her conscience. "All rise," the clerk announced as Judge Wilson entered, her stern presence commanding immediate respect. The video screen flickered to life, revealing Arthur in what Elizabeth recognized as his company's conference room, flanked by 3 lawyers. Samantha was notably absent. "This emergency hearing will address both the temporary restraining order and immediate custody arrangements for Emma Mason," Judge Wilson began, her voice crisp. "Given this morning's events at Northwestern Memorial, I'm particularly interested in understanding how we've reached this point." Arthur's lead lawyer leaned forward. "Your Honor, my client's actions, while perhaps overzealous, stemmed from natural paternal concern. Mrs. Mason's departure with their daughter was sudden and unauthorized." "Unauthorized?" Elizabeth couldn't help but interrupt, earning a gentle touch on her arm from Patricia. Judge Wilson raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Mason, you'll have your turn. Continue, counselor." The next hour passed in a blur of legal arguments. Arthur's team painted a picture of a devoted father blindsided by his wife's irrational actions. They presented financial records showing his generous provisions for the family, emphasizing his ability to provide the best medical care money could buy. When Patricia rose to respond, her approach was methodical. "Your Honor, we've submitted extensive documentation of Emma's medical condition and Mr. Mason's pattern of neglect. Dr. Henderson is available to testify about the critical nature of Emma's diagnosis and the necessity of immediate treatment." Dr. Henderson's testimony proved devastating to Arthur's case. She detailed Emma's condition with professional precision, explaining how earlier intervention might have prevented the current crisis. As she spoke, Elizabeth watched Arthur's face on the screen, noting how he flinched at each medical term, each description of symptoms he'd dismissed. "In your professional opinion," Judge Wilson asked, "was Mrs. Mason's decision to seek immediate treatment justified?" "Absolutely," Dr. Henderson replied without hesitation. Emma's condition required urgent intervention. Any delay could have severely compromised her prognosis. Patricia then presented the timeline of Elizabeth's attempts to engage Arthur in Emma's medical care. Text messages, emails, and calendar invitations to doctor's appointments all met with dismissal or indifference. Elizabeth felt a strange sense of validation seeing it all laid out so clearly. "And now," Patricia continued, "we submit evidence of Mr. Mason's recent financial activities, demonstrating a pattern of prioritizing personal expenditures over his daughter's medical needs." The financial records drew a sharp intake of breath from Judge Wilson. Luxury hotel charges, expensive jewelry purchases, and lavish restaurant bills painted a damning picture against the backdrop of ignored medical recommendations. "Your Honor," Arthur's lawyer interjected, "my client's personal expenses have no bearing on his ability to care for his daughter." "I disagree," Judge Wilson's voice cut through the protest. "They speak directly to Mr. Mason's priorities and judgment." She turned her attention to the video screen. "Mr. Mason, would you like to address the court?" Arthur straightened his tie, his CEO persona sliding into place. "Your Honor, I admit I may have been distracted by work obligations, but I love my daughter. I can provide her with the best medical care money can buy." Elizabeth's actions were extreme and unnecessary. "Unnecessary?" Elizabeth's voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. Patricia nodded, giving her permission to continue. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Wilson gestured for her to proceed. 3 weeks ago, Emma could barely hold her spoon at breakfast. Her hands were shaking so badly that she cried in frustration. When I called Arthur, he was at a casino in Atlantic City with his assistant. He told me to handle it because he had important meetings. Elizabeth's voice grew stronger as she spoke. Every time I tried to discuss Emma's symptoms, he dismissed them. Every doctor's appointment he was too busy to attend. Even now, he talks about money and the best care it can buy, but he hasn't once asked about Emma's actual treatment plan. Arthur's face darkened. That's not fair. Mr. Mason, Judge Wilson interrupted sharply. You've had your say. She studied the documents before her for a long moment. Dr. Henderson, what is Emma's current status? She responded well to her first treatment, but we're looking at an intensive therapy schedule. Consistency and stability are crucial for her recovery. Judge Wilson nodded, then delivered her ruling with unwavering certainty. The temporary restraining order will remain in effect. Mr. Mason is to maintain a minimum distance of 1,000 feet from both Northwestern Memorial Hospital and his daughter's current residence. Any communication must be through counsel until he completes both anger management and parenting classes. Arthur's protests were cut short as Judge Wilson continued. Furthermore, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mrs. Mason, with all medical decisions under her sole discretion. Mr. Mason will have supervised visitation rights only after completing the court-mandated classes and demonstrating a genuine understanding of his daughter's medical needs. Elizabeth felt tears threatening, but held them back. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about protecting Emma. Mrs. Mason, Judge Wilson's voice softened slightly. Your daughter's medical care must remain your priority. Document everything. This court will reconvene in 30 days to review the situation. She turned back to the screen. Mr. Mason, I strongly suggest you use this time to reflect on your choices and priorities. Court adjourned. As the video feed cut off, Elizabeth finally allowed herself to exhale. Robert squeezed her hand, his presence steady and reassuring. We should get back to Emma, he said softly. She'll want to know everything went okay. The drive back to the hospital was quiet, Elizabeth processing the morning's events. Patricia had stayed behind to handle the paperwork, promising to send detailed instructions about documenting all future interactions with Arthur. They found Emma sitting up in bed surrounded by art supplies, her face brighter than it had been in weeks. Mom, look what we made. She held up a collection of paper superheroes, each one sporting an IV line like hers. Michael helped me make a whole team. Elizabeth hugged her daughter carefully, mindful of the IV. They're beautiful, sweetheart. Did you have a good morning? Uh-huh. I met Madison and Tyler. They get special medicine too. And we had art time, and Miss Jenny read us stories, and Emma's excited chatter continued as Elizabeth settled into the chair beside her bed. Robert watched them from the doorway, his expression soft. I'll go get us some lunch, he offered, understanding Elizabeth's need for time alone with Emma. As Emma showed off each of her superhero drawings, Elizabeth felt the tension of the morning slowly dissolve. The legal victory meant nothing compared to this moment. Her daughter happy, receiving proper treatment, surrounded by caring professionals who understood her needs. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Arthur's lawyers are already talking appeal, but we're solid. Focus on Emma. Document everything. You did good today. Elizabeth tucked the phone away, choosing instead to focus on Emma's storytelling. Outside the window, Chicago's skyline stood bright against a clear winter sky, as if reflecting the clarity she felt in her heart. They had crossed another hurdle, faced another storm, and emerged stronger. Mom? Emma's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Can we send Daddy one of my drawings so he knows I'm being brave? Elizabeth's heart clenched at the simple request. Of course we can, baby. That's a wonderful idea. She brushed Emma's hair back from her forehead, marveling at her daughter's capacity for love even in the midst of adult complications she couldn't fully understand. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Elizabeth would carefully photograph one of the superhero drawings and send it to Patricia to forward to Arthur's lawyers. It was a small gesture, but perhaps it would remind him of what really mattered. Not the legal battles or his wounded pride, but the bright-eyed little girl who still wanted to share her art with her father, despite everything. 2 weeks after the hearing, Chicago's winter had settled in earnest. Elizabeth stood at the window of Emma's hospital room, watching snow swirl against the darkening sky. Behind her, Emma slept peacefully, her body gradually responding to the intensive treatment protocol Dr. Henderson had designed. "Blood counts are improving," Dr. Henderson murmured, reviewing the latest test results. "She's responding better than we initially hoped. The immediate intervention made a significant difference." Elizabeth turned from the window, relief washing over her. "So the transfusions are working?" "They're buying us time," Dr. Henderson explained carefully. "But we need to discuss long-term solutions. I'd like to start testing potential bone marrow donors. Family members first, then the National Registry if necessary." The doctor's words triggered a memory of Arthur's last email, forwarded through their lawyers. He'd demanded to be tested as a potential donor, his message switching between threats and pleading. Elizabeth had forwarded it to Dr. Henderson without response. "We'll test everyone," Elizabeth agreed. "Whatever gives Emma the best chance." A soft knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Robert entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and followed by Mrs. Chen, their neighbor from Lincoln Park. "Hope we're not interrupting," Mrs. Chen whispered, noting Emma's sleep. "I brought more of that soup she liked yesterday." Elizabeth smiled gratefully. Mrs. Chen had become a regular visitor, her maternal warmth and quiet strength providing comfort to both mother and daughter. As a retired judge, she also offered valuable insights into their legal situation. "How's our girl doing?" Robert asked, handing Elizabeth a coffee. Dr. Henderson shared the positive news about Emma's blood counts, then excused herself to check on other patients. As she left, Emma stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Grandma Chen," she called out sleepily, using the title she'd bestowed on their neighbor. "Did you bring more magic soup?" "Of course, sweet girl, Mrs." Chen moved to Emma's bedside. "And guess what else? I heard from my daughter in California. She's sending you some special fuzzy socks that help children in hospitals feel stronger." While Emma chatted excitedly with Mrs. Chen about the promised socks, Elizabeth's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. She stepped into the hallway to read it, Robert following with concern on his face. "Arthur's completed his first anger management session," Elizabeth reported quietly. "His lawyer is pushing for supervised video calls with Emma." Robert's expression darkened. "It's too soon. One therapy session doesn't change." "I know," Elizabeth interrupted, "but Emma asks about him. Maybe controlled video calls wouldn't be harmful. We could monitor everything, end the call if he gets inappropriate." Their discussion was interrupted by Michael, arriving for his shift. The nurse had become more than just a caregiver. He was Emma's confidant and champion, making even the most difficult procedures bearable with his gentle humor. "Hey, superhero squad," he called out, entering Emma's room. "Ready for our evening rounds?" Emma's face lit up. "Michael, Grandma Chen brought more magic soup, and I'm getting special socks from California." "Wow, sounds like someone's popular." Michael began his routine checks with practiced efficiency. "How about we do your vitals, then you can tell me all about these magical socks while you have your soup." Elizabeth watched their interaction, grateful for the network of support that had formed around them. Between the hospital staff, Mrs. Chen, Robert, and their security team, they'd created a safe and nurturing environment for Emma's recovery. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep again, Elizabeth sat with Mrs. Chen in the small family lounge down the hall. "You're worried about the video calls," Mrs. Chen observed, her legal experience evident in her perception. Elizabeth nodded. "I don't want to keep Emma from her father, but after his behavior at the hospital..." "Children are remarkably resilient," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully, "sometimes more than we give them credit for. The question is, can Arthur maintain appropriate boundaries? That's what scares me. He's never been good with boundaries. Everything's always been on his terms." Mrs. Chen considered this. "Then perhaps we set very clear terms first. Written guidelines for appropriate conversation topics. A neutral supervisor present during calls. Immediate termination if he becomes aggressive or manipulative. The wisdom in this approach resonated with Elizabeth. Would you consider being the supervisor? Emma trusts you and your legal background. I'd be honored, Mrs. Chen smiled warmly. Now tell me about the bone marrow testing. Robert mentioned Dr. Henderson brought it up. As they discussed the medical challenges ahead, Elizabeth felt a familiar wave of gratitude for this unexpected friendship. Mrs. Chen's presence had brought not only legal insight but also maternal guidance that Elizabeth desperately needed. Their conversation was interrupted by a noise from Emma's room. They rushed back to find her in the midst of a nightmare, calling out for her father. "Daddy, don't be mad." Emma thrashed against the sheets, her IV line tangling. "Shh, baby, you're safe." Elizabeth gathered her daughter close, mindful of the medical equipment. "Everything's okay. Mommy's here." Emma's eyes opened, tears streaming down her face. "I saw Daddy yelling again. Why was he so angry at the hospital?" Elizabeth met Mrs. Chen's sympathetic gaze over Emma's head. "Sometimes grown-ups don't handle their feelings very well, sweetheart. But your daddy is working on that. He's talking to special doctors who help people manage their angry feelings better. Like how I'm seeing special doctors for my tired blood." Something like that. Elizabeth smoothed Emma's hair. "Everyone needs help sometimes, even daddies." Mrs. Chen approached the bed, her presence calming. "Would you like to hear a story about a brave little girl in China who had to be strong while her family learned to be strong too?" Emma nodded, settling back against her pillows as Mrs. Chen began a tale that seemed simultaneously ancient and perfectly applicable to their situation. Elizabeth listened too, recognizing the therapeutic value in the story's gentle messages about family, healing, and forgiveness. Robert returned from a coffee run to find them all engrossed in Mrs. Chen's storytelling. He settled quietly into a chair, understanding the importance of this moment. Later, after Emma had drifted back to sleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home, Elizabeth reviewed Dr. Henderson's proposed schedule for bone marrow testing. Robert would be first, followed by Elizabeth. Arthur's testing would be arranged through a hospital in New York, supervised by his lawyers. "We should start looking at schools," Robert suggested quietly. "For when Emma's stronger, there's a good private school near the house that has experience with children with medical needs." The suggestion startled Elizabeth. She'd been so focused on immediate medical concerns that longer-term planning hadn't seemed possible. But Emma was improving. They were building a life here. Perhaps it was time to think about the future. Her phone buzzed with another message from Patricia. "Arthur's therapist submitted a preliminary report. He's attending sessions regularly. Would you like to review the proposed guidelines for video calls?" Elizabeth looked at Emma's peaceful face, then at Robert's supportive expression. "Yes," she replied. "Send them over. But tell them we have our own conditions to add. It's time we all learned some new ways of being a family." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Chicago in pristine white. Like the fresh snow covering the city's complexities, they were building new layers over old wounds, creating something stable and clean from the chaos of their past. The morning of the scheduled video call, Elizabeth woke before dawn, her mind racing with concerns. She'd spent hours reviewing the agreed-upon guidelines with Patricia and Mrs. Chen. 15 minutes maximum, no discussion of legal matters, no promises about returning to New York, and absolutely no mention of Samantha. Emma sat in her hospital bed, wearing her new fuzzy socks from California and the butterfly pajamas Michael had brought her. "Will Daddy be able to see my superhero drawings?" she asked, arranging her artwork carefully on the rolling table. "Of course, sweetheart." Elizabeth helped adjust the laptop's angle. "Remember what we talked about? This is just like when we FaceTime with Grandpa Robert, but Grandma Chen will be here too." Mrs. Chen arrived early, carrying her usual thermos of calming tea and a serene smile that belied her sharp legal mind. She'd positioned herself as a friendly observer, rather than an authority figure, helping Emma feel more comfortable with the supervision. 5 minutes, Michael announced, poking his head in. He'd rearranged his schedule to be nearby during the call, understanding the emotional weight of this moment. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she smoothed Emma's hair. "Baby, if you want to stop the call at any time, just squeeze my hand, okay? Or tell Grandma Chen. No one will be upset." "I remember, Mommy." Emma nodded solemnly. "Dr. Henderson says it's okay to take breaks when things feel too big." The video call connected precisely at 10 a.m. Arthur's face filled the screen, and Elizabeth's breath caught at the changes in him. He looked thinner, less polished than she remembered. The aggressive CEO persona had been replaced by something more vulnerable. "Emma," his voice cracked. "Princess, you look so beautiful." Emma clutched Elizabeth's hand but smiled. "Hi, Daddy. Look at my drawings. This one's Captain Bloodcell. She helps fight the tired blood monsters." Arthur's eyes glistened as Emma showed him her artwork, explaining each superhero's special powers. He listened intently, asking appropriate questions about her creative process, rather than dwelling on her medical condition. "And this is Michael." Emma pointed to a figure wearing scrubs. "He's a real superhero. He helps me be brave when I get my special medicine." That's wonderful, sweetheart," Arthur managed. "I'm glad you have such good helpers there." Elizabeth felt Emma's grip tighten when Arthur wiped his eyes. "Are you sad, Daddy?" Mrs. Chen shifted slightly, ready to intervene, but Arthur surprised them all with his response. "I am a little sad, Princess, but not because of you. I'm sad because I wasn't a very good helper before. But I'm learning to be better, just like you're learning to be stronger." Emma considered this. "My doctors say learning new things takes practice. Are you practicing too?" "Every day," Arthur nodded. "I go to special classes where they teach grown-ups how to handle big feelings better. Kind of like how your doctors teach you about your medicine." Elizabeth felt tears threatening at this unexpected moment of genuine connection. She caught Mrs. Chen's approving nod. Arthur was staying within the guidelines while maintaining authentic communication. "Do you want to see my new socks?" Emma changed subjects with childlike ease. "Grandma Chen's daughter sent them from California. They have special grippy things on the bottom so I don't slip when I walk to the bathroom." Arthur's expression flickered at the mention of Mrs. Chen, but he maintained his composure. "They look very cozy. Are they helping you feel stronger?" "Uh-huh. And guess what? I made a new friend named Madison. She has tired blood too, but she's almost all better now. We have art class together." As Emma chattered about her hospital experiences, Elizabeth watched Arthur carefully. He seemed genuinely engaged, showing none of the dismissive behavior that had characterized their last months in New York. His therapy sessions appeared to be having an impact. 2 minutes, Mrs. Chen said gently, reminding everyone of the time limit. Emma's face fell slightly. "Already?" "Time flies when we're sharing wonderful art," Arthur said quickly, preventing any tension. "Maybe next time you can show me more of your superhero team." "Next time?" Emma looked hopefully at Elizabeth. Elizabeth squeezed her daughter's hand. "If everything goes well with your treatment, we can schedule another call next week." Arthur accepted this condition without protest, another marked change from his previous behavior. "I'd like that very much. And Emma, I'm very proud of how brave you're being. I love you, Princess." "Love you too, Daddy." Emma waved as the call ended. The room fell silent for a moment, heavy with emotional aftermath. Then Emma turned to Elizabeth, her eyes wide. "Did you see, Mom? Daddy liked Captain Bloodcell best. Can I make him his own superhero for next time?" "That's a wonderful idea," Mrs. Chen interjected, giving Elizabeth a moment to compose herself. "Maybe we could work on it together during your art time." Michael appeared with perfect timing, carrying Emma's morning medication. "How about we take care of our superhero first, then you can tell me all about your call while we do our checks." As Emma was distracted by Michael's cheerful routine, Elizabeth stepped into the hallway with Mrs. Chen. "He's showing real progress," Mrs. Chen observed. "The therapy seems to be helping him focus on Emma's needs rather than his own agenda." Elizabeth nodded, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I didn't expect. He was so different from that day at the hospital." People can surprise us. Mrs. Chen smiled gently, especially when properly motivated. The question is, can he maintain this growth? Before Elizabeth could respond, Dr. Henderson approached with a tablet in hand. Elizabeth, we have the first round of bone marrow testing results. Do you have a moment? The medical reality rushed back, grounding Elizabeth in their primary purpose. She followed Dr. Henderson to her office where the doctor pulled up detailed charts. Robert isn't a match, Dr. Henderson began carefully, and unfortunately, neither are you. We've received Arthur's preliminary results from New York. He's not compatible either. Elizabeth's heart sank. What's our next step? We'll expand the search to the National Registry. Emma's mixed ethnic background makes finding a perfect match more challenging, but there are promising partial matches we can explore. Back in Emma's room, they found her teaching Michael about her superhero team while he checked her vital signs. Her pale face was animated with excitement as she described each character's origin story. "Mom," she called out, "Michael says maybe we can make a whole comic book about the superhero hospital. Could we send it to other kids with tired blood?" Elizabeth forced a smile, pushing aside her worries about the bone marrow results. "That's a wonderful idea, baby. Maybe Madison would like to help too." As Emma launched into plans for her comic book, Elizabeth's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Arthur's therapist submitted a positive report about today's interaction. He's requesting twice-weekly calls. Elizabeth watched her daughter's enthusiastic planning, seeing both her creativity and her fatigue. "Once a week," she typed back. "Let's not overwhelm her. She needs to focus on getting stronger." Mrs. Chen squeezed Elizabeth's shoulder supportively. "Small steps," she whispered. "Rome wasn't built in a day, and families don't heal overnight either." Outside the window, Chicago's winter sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light across Emma's bed. She was holding court with Michael and Mrs. Chen, describing her vision for the superhero hospital comic book, her medical challenges momentarily forgotten in the excitement of creation. Elizabeth sat beside her daughter, letting Emma's voice wash over her. They had crossed another milestone today, not a perfect one, but a step forward nonetheless. Like the sun breaking through winter clouds, there were moments of warmth and hope amid the challenges they still faced. Dr. Henderson's office felt smaller than usual as she outlined the current situation to Elizabeth and Robert. 3 weeks had passed since the first round of donor testing, and the urgency in the doctor's voice was unmistakable. "Emma's response to transfusions is diminishing," she explained, pointing to a chart on her computer screen. "We're seeing shorter intervals between treatments. The National Registry has provided several partial matches, but none ideal for her specific genetic profile." Elizabeth gripped the arms of her chair. "What are our options?" "We're expanding the search internationally," Dr. Henderson replied. "And I'd like to start testing extended family members. Even distant relatives could be potential matches." Robert leaned forward. "I've already contacted my side of the family. My brother in Boston is getting tested this week." Elizabeth's mind raced through her family tree, mentally cataloging potential donors. Her mother's siblings were scattered across the country, many of whom she hadn't spoken to in years. And Arthur's family. "I'll need to contact Arthur," she said quietly. "His sister in California might be compatible." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Elizabeth's phone buzzed with a message from Arthur's lawyer. The weekly video calls had been going well, each one showing Arthur's continued progress in therapy. Now he was requesting permission to be tested again, this time for a partial match procedure. Dr. Henderson reviewed Arthur's latest medical records from New York. While he wasn't a complete match, there's a possibility of a haploidentical transplant. It's not ideal, but if we don't find a better match soon. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Michael poked his head in, his usual cheerful expression tight with concern. "Sorry to interrupt, but Emma's running a fever. We're starting antibiotics." Elizabeth was on her feet immediately. "How high?" 102.3, Michael replied. "Dr. Liu is with her now. She's asking for you." They found Emma curled up in her hospital bed, her face flushed with fever as Dr. Liu examined her. Madison, Emma's new friend from art therapy, sat in the corner with her mother, both looking worried. "Mom," Emma's voice was weak. "My superhero powers aren't working today." Elizabeth rushed to her daughter's side, smoothing back sweat-dampened hair. "That's okay, baby. Sometimes even superheroes need extra help." While the medical team administered antibiotics, Madison approached Emma's bed cautiously. "I made you something," she said, holding out a drawing. "It's Super Antibody Girl. She helps fight fever monsters." Emma managed a small smile. "Can she join Captain Bloodcell's team?" "Of course, they can fight the monsters together." Elizabeth watched the interaction with a mixture of hope and fear. Madison was 3 months further along in her treatment, already showing signs of recovery after finding a matching donor in her extended family. Emma's journey was proving more complicated. Later that evening, after Emma's fever had finally begun to respond to treatment, Elizabeth sat in the quiet hospital room reviewing files of potential donors. Robert had gone home to coordinate with family members, and Mrs. Chen had brought dinner that sat mostly untouched. "Elizabeth?" Arthur's voice came softly through the tablet propped on Emma's rolling table. Their scheduled video call had been delayed due to the fever, but Emma had insisted on seeing her father before sleep. "She just dozed off," Elizabeth whispered, adjusting the camera so Arthur could see their sleeping daughter. "The fever's down to 100.1. Arthur's face showed genuine concern. "Patricia forwarded Dr. Henderson's report about the haploidentical transplant possibility. I've already scheduled additional testing." "Thank you," Elizabeth replied, surprised by his proactive response. "Your sister Catherine. Have you spoken with her?" "She's flying in from Los Angeles tomorrow, going straight to the testing center." Arthur paused, then added softly, "Samantha and we're not together anymore. I've been focusing on my therapy and Emma's needs." Elizabeth absorbed this information without comment. Arthur's personal life wasn't her concern anymore, though she appreciated him choosing to inform her without drama or expectations. A noise from the bed drew their attention. Emma stirred, blinking at the tablet screen. "Daddy, did you see my new superhero? Madison made her for me." "I did, Princess. Super Antibody Girl looks very powerful. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but Michael says my fever is shrinking, so the medicine must be working." Emma's voice was drowsy, but determined. "Mom, can you show Daddy the donor papers? Maybe he can help find more superheroes for my team." Elizabeth felt tears prick her eyes at Emma's innocent way of viewing their desperate search for a donor. "Of course, sweetheart. Your daddy's already helping. His sister, your Aunt Catherine, is coming to get tested tomorrow." "Really?" Emma perked up slightly. "I haven't seen Aunt Catherine since Christmas. Does she still have purple hair?" Arthur chuckled softly. "It's blue now, actually. She's very excited to help." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Liu returning for another check. Arthur said his goodbyes, promising to call again tomorrow with news from Catherine's testing. As Dr. Liu examined Emma, Elizabeth's phone lit up with a message from Patricia. "Arthur's filed a motion to modify the restraining order. He's requesting permission to be present if he's confirmed as a viable donor candidate." Elizabeth watched Dr. Liu check Emma's temperature, her mind working through the implications. If Arthur proved to be their best option for a partial match transplant, his physical presence might become necessary. The question was whether he had truly changed enough to handle the situation appropriately. 101.2, Dr. Liu announced. "Still higher than we'd like, but trending down. I'm adding another antibiotic to the protocol just to be safe." Emma dozed through the medication changes, clutching Madison's drawing of Super Antibody Girl. Elizabeth studied her daughter's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the pallor beneath the fever's flush. They were running out of time to find the perfect match. Robert returned late that night carrying a stack of donor registry paperwork and a fresh cup of coffee for Elizabeth. "Any change?" "Fever's slowly coming down," Elizabeth replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Catherine's flying in tomorrow for testing. And Arthur. She hesitated, then showed him Patricia's message. Robert read it twice before speaking. What does your gut tell you? That we need to focus on finding a donor. Everything else is secondary. Elizabeth moved to adjust Emma's blankets. If Arthur turns out to be the best option and if he's maintained his progress in therapy, then we deal with that when it happens, Robert finished. One step at a time. Emma stirred again, her eyes fluttering open. Grandpa, will you tell me the story about the princess who had to find magical helpers? Robert settled into the chair beside her bed, his voice taking on the gentle cadence of a storyteller. Once upon a time, there was a brave young princess who discovered she needed special magic to help her kingdom. Elizabeth listened as her father wove Emma's current situation into a fairy tale, where every medical procedure became a magical quest, and every potential donor was a possible hero in the story. Even Arthur's role was transformed into that of a distant king learning to use his powers wisely. Outside the window, Chicago's lights twinkled against the night sky, steady and unchanging. Somewhere out there, Elizabeth thought, their matching donor existed. Whether it would be Catherine with her blue hair, Arthur with his partial match, or a stranger from across the world, someone would help their little girl beat this monster. Emma drifted back to sleep as Robert's story concluded, her fever-flushed face finally peaceful. Elizabeth checked her phone one last time. Messages from Mrs. Chen offering to bring breakfast tomorrow, from Michael confirming he'd be on duty again, from Patricia outlining the legal implications of modifying the restraining order. Their support network was strong, their medical team was dedicated, and even Arthur was showing genuine change. Now they just needed time. Time for the fever to break, time for test results to come back, time to find the right donor before Emma's condition deteriorated further. Elizabeth settled into her usual overnight position in the reclining chair, watching the gentle rise and fall of Emma's chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, in the quiet of the hospital night, she allowed herself to believe in happy endings, even if they didn't look quite like she'd originally imagined. Catherine Mason breezed into Northwestern Memorial's testing center like a burst of California sunshine, her electric blue hair and flowing bohemian dress a stark contrast to the sterile medical environment. Elizabeth watched through the waiting room window as Arthur's younger sister filled out paperwork, her rainbow-painted fingernails gripping the pen with nervous energy. Is that really Aunt Catherine? Emma pressed her face against the glass, her fever finally broken after 3 days of aggressive antibiotics. Her hair is even prettier than at Christmas. Elizabeth smoothed Emma's hospital gown. Yes, baby. She came all the way from Los Angeles to help us find your matching donor. Catherine looked up, spotting them through the window. Her face lit up as she waved enthusiastically at Emma, though Elizabeth noticed the shock in her eyes at seeing her niece's frail condition. The testing center nurse finished processing her paperwork and led her to the blood draw station. Mom, Emma tugged at Elizabeth's sleeve. Can Aunt Catherine come visit after her superhero testing? Superhero testing. Catherine's voice carried from the doorway, where she now stood with the nurse. Is that what we're calling it? I love it. She approached Emma's wheelchair carefully, kneeling to her niece's eye level. And you bet I'm coming to visit. I heard you've been building quite the superhero team in here. Emma launched into an excited explanation of her superhero medical squad, complete with Madison's recent addition of Super Antibody Girl. Catherine listened intently, her eyes glistening as she took in Emma's enthusiasm despite her obvious fatigue. Mrs. Mason, Dr. Henderson appeared with her tablet. Could you join me for a moment? Catherine, the nurse is ready for your blood draw. In Dr. Henderson's office, Elizabeth found Robert already waiting. The doctor's expression was serious as she pulled up several charts on her screen. The International Registry has identified a potential match in Denmark, she began. The compatibility markers are promising, but there are complications with international medical transport, given current regulations. We're working through the red tape, but it could take weeks we don't have. Robert leaned forward. What about my brother's results? Unfortunately, not a match. Dr. Henderson pulled up another file. We'll have Catherine's preliminary results in 48 hours. In the meantime, we've completed a more detailed analysis of Arthur's partial match status. Elizabeth felt her heart skip. And a haploidentical transplant from Arthur could work, but it would require multiple procedures and a longer recovery period. The risk of complications is higher than with a perfect match. The weight of these decisions pressed down on Elizabeth's shoulders. Every option seemed to carry its own set of challenges and potential dangers. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Michael poked his head in, his expression unusually serious. "Sorry, but Emma's asking for her mom. She's having one of her anxiety episodes." Elizabeth rushed back to find Emma curled up in her wheelchair, breathing rapidly, while Catherine sat nearby, looking helpless. She was fine 1 minute, then started panicking about the needle marks from her morning blood draw. Catherine explained. "Hey, sweetheart." Elizabeth knelt beside the wheelchair. "Remember our special breathing? Like we're blowing out birthday candles?" Emma nodded, trying to follow her mother's exaggerated breathing pattern. Catherine watched the interaction with a mix of concern and admiration. "You're so good with her," she said softly as Emma's breathing steadied. "Arthur, he told me how badly he messed up, how he wasn't there when you both needed him." Elizabeth met Catherine's gaze. "He's working on changing that." "I know. He's different now. Actually canceled 3 major business deals to focus on his therapy." Catherine reached for Emma's hand. "I've never seen my brother like this. The old Arthur would never have admitted he was wrong, let alone work to fix it." Once Emma had calmed completely, Michael suggested taking her to the playroom where Madison was waiting. Elizabeth watched them go, then turned to Catherine. "Thank you for coming. I know it's a lot to ask." Catherine cut her off with a gentle hug. "We're family. Even if my idiot brother forgot that for a while, I never did." She pulled back, wiping away tears. "Besides, I've been looking for an excuse to rock blue hair in a hospital, really brighten up the place." They spent the afternoon in Emma's room with Catherine regaling them with stories about her life in California, while they waited for her to be cleared to leave the testing center. Emma was fascinated by her aunt's tales of surfing and writing children's books, particularly when Catherine offered to help her turn her superhero hospital stories into a real book. "We could make it digital," Catherine suggested, her creative mind spinning. "Share it with other kids going through similar treatments. Give them their own superheroes to relate to." Emma's eyes lit up. "Could Madison help too? She makes really good superhero costumes." "Of course. The more heroes, the better the team, right?" Elizabeth watched their interaction, noting how Catherine naturally balanced enthusiasm with sensitivity to Emma's energy levels. When Emma began showing signs of fatigue, Catherine smoothly transitioned from excited planning to quiet storytelling. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Catherine joined Elizabeth in the family lounge. "I had no idea it was this bad," she admitted. Arthur tried to explain, but seeing her like this, "The doctors are hopeful," Elizabeth replied. "We just need to find the right donor match." "And if it's me?" Catherine's voice was determined. "I'm ready. Whatever she needs. Even if you're not a match, just being here means everything to her." Elizabeth hesitated, then added, "Arthur's been asking to modify the restraining order, if he turns out to be the best donor option." Catherine nodded, understanding. "He's doing the work, Elizabeth. Really doing it. Not just for show or for business, but because he finally understands what he almost lost." Their conversation was interrupted by Robert, arriving with evening coffee and news. The Danish registry just updated their files. The potential match there fell through. They found some compatibility issues in the secondary markers. Elizabeth felt her hope flicker, but Catherine reached for her hand. "Then we focus on the options we have. Between me, Arthur, and whoever else we can find, we'll figure this out." That evening, during Emma's scheduled video call with Arthur, Catherine joined them. The siblings' interaction was revealing. Gone was the old pattern of Arthur dismissing his sister's unstable lifestyle choices. Instead, he listened intently as she described her testing experience and her ideas for Emma's superhero book. "You'll need a publisher," he said thoughtfully. "I know someone at a children's press in Chicago. Already handled, big brother. Catherine grinned. My agent's on board. All proceeds will go to research for kids with similar conditions. Emma beamed at this cooperation between her father and aunt. Can I draw the pictures? Madison can help. It's your story, superhero, Catherine assured her. You're the creative director on this project. After the call ended and Emma had drifted off to sleep, Elizabeth found herself alone with Catherine in the quiet hospital room. The older woman was sketching preliminary ideas for the book's layout, her artistic energy seemingly boundless. I missed this, Catherine said suddenly, being part of her life. After you left New York, I wanted to reach out, but I wasn't sure. You're here now, Elizabeth replied simply. That's what matters. Outside, Chicago's lights twinkled against the night sky, a familiar sight after weeks in the hospital. Catherine moved to the window, her blue hair reflecting in the glass. Whatever happens with the test results, she said quietly, I'm not disappearing again. Emma needs her whole family, the ones who show up, who fight alongside her. Elizabeth watched her sleeping daughter, thinking about family and blood ties and the different ways people prove their love, whether through bone marrow donation, creative projects, or simply being present. Each person in Emma's life was contributing to her healing in their own way. Tomorrow would bring Catherine's preliminary results, more data about Arthur's partial match status, and the continued search through international registries. But tonight, watching her former sister-in-law sketch superhero stories by Emma's bedside, Elizabeth felt a new kind of hope building, not just for finding a donor, but for rebuilding a family in a way that put Emma's needs truly first. The early spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Dr. Henderson's office as she delivered the news that would change everything. Elizabeth sat between Robert and Catherine, gripping their hands as the doctor explained the test results. Catherine is a match, Dr. Henderson announced, her professional demeanor softening with genuine joy. Not just partial, we're looking at a near-perfect compatibility across all major markers. Catherine's blue hair fell forward as she burst into tears of relief. When can we start? We'll begin the preparation protocol immediately. The actual transplant can happen within 2 weeks. Dr. Henderson turned to Elizabeth. Emma's latest blood work shows she's stable enough for the procedure. The antibiotics have done their job. Elizabeth felt lightheaded with relief. After months of searching, of watching Emma grow weaker while they tested donor after donor, they finally had their miracle. And it had come from within their own family, Arthur's free-spirited sister, who had flown across the country without hesitation to help. Does this mean I get to be a real superhero? Catherine asked, wiping away tears. Emma will love that. Speaking of Emma, Robert interjected gently, shouldn't we tell her the good news? They found Emma in the hospital playroom, working with Madison on their latest addition to the superhero hospital comic. Both girls had their heads bent over a colorful drawing, Madison's recovery serving as daily inspiration for Emma's own journey. Hey, superstar, Catherine called out. Got some news about our special testing? Emma looked up, her pale face brightening. Did your superhero powers match mine? They sure did, kiddo. Catherine knelt beside her niece's chair. Looks like Aunt Catherine gets to join your superhero medical squad for real. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Catherine began her pre-donation protocol while Emma underwent conditioning treatment. Elizabeth watched in awe as her former sister-in-law approached every medical procedure with the same creativity she brought to everything else, turning each step into an adventure that helped ease Emma's anxiety. Look, we're getting matching superhero badges, Catherine declared after one particularly difficult treatment, showing Emma the bandage on her arm decorated with tiny stars. Special medals for brave warriors. Arthur's reaction to the news about his sister being the matching donor had been surprisingly gentle. During his video calls with Emma, he focused on encouraging her strength and praising Catherine's superhero status, rather than trying to insert himself into the process. I've been talking about it in therapy, he admitted to Elizabeth during a brief private conversation. Learning to step back, to support without controlling, to trust others to help our daughter even when I can't be the one to do it. The morning of the transplant, Elizabeth arrived at the hospital to find Mrs. Chen already there, setting up a small altar of encouraging messages from Emma's growing support network. Madison had drawn a special picture of Super Antibody Girl welcoming Mega Match Aunt Catherine to the team. Michael hung it prominently where Emma could see it during the procedure. "Ready for the big power-up, superhero?" Michael asked as he prepared Emma for the transplant. Emma nodded bravely, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Is Daddy going to watch on the tablet?" "I'm right here, Princess." Arthur's voice came through the video call that had been set up at Emma's request. "Right here with you, even from New York." Catherine was brought in, already hooked up to the collection machine. Her blue hair was partially hidden under a medical cap, but she'd managed to add superhero stickers to her hospital gown. "Hey, partner. Ready to share some super strength?" The procedure itself was surprisingly quiet, a peaceful transfer of life-giving cells from aunt to niece. Elizabeth sat beside Emma's bed, holding her hand while Robert maintained a steady presence near Catherine. Mrs. Chen quietly recorded everything in a journal she'd been keeping for Emma, documenting each step of her journey. "Mom," Emma whispered halfway through the transplant, "I can feel the superpowers working." Elizabeth smiled through her tears. "That's because you and Aunt Catherine make an amazing team." The days following the transplant were critical. Emma was moved to isolation to protect her compromised immune system, but the hospital staff worked tirelessly to maintain her spirits. Catherine, recovering from her donation, set up camp in a nearby room, conducting dramatic readings of their developing superhero story through the intercom system. A week after the transplant, Dr. Henderson brought the first round of post-procedure results. "The initial signs are extremely positive," she announced to the assembled family. "Emma's body is accepting the new cells beautifully. Catherine's strong match is proving to be exactly what we needed." The next few weeks showed steady improvement. Color returned to Emma's cheeks, and her energy levels began to rise. Madison visited regularly, the two girls working on their comic book through the isolation room's window. Arthur's daily video calls became a source of genuine joy rather than tension, his continued therapy helping him maintain appropriate boundaries while building a healthier relationship with his daughter. 1 month post-transplant, Emma was strong enough to leave isolation. Catherine, who had extended her stay in Chicago indefinitely, arrived that morning with a special surprise. "Look what just arrived." She held up a printed proof of their superhero hospital book. "The publisher fast-tracked it. Want to check out the final version?" Emma's eyes lit up as she paged through the book. There were all her characters, professionally illustrated but staying true to her original designs. Madison's contributions were credited, along with stories from other young patients they'd met during their hospital stay. "And look at the dedication page," Catherine pointed out. Emma read aloud. "To all the young superheroes fighting their own battles, and to the amazing teams who helped them find their strength, special thanks to the real superheroes at Northwestern Memorial Hospital." Elizabeth watched her daughter's face glow with pride and remembered the scared little girl who had arrived in Chicago months ago. That night, during their regular video call, Emma excitedly showed Arthur the book. "I'm so proud of you, Princess," Arthur said softly. "You've been braver than any superhero I know." Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Elizabeth stood at the familiar hospital window with Catherine, both women reflecting on their journey. "The publisher wants to distribute the book to children's hospitals nationwide," Catherine mentioned. "All proceeds going to research and support for families going through similar battles." Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "You've given Emma so much more than just healthy bone marrow. You've helped her turn her struggle into something that will help others." "She did that herself," Catherine smiled. "I just provided some creative backup." Robert joined them, carrying coffee and news from Dr. Henderson. If Emma's progress continues at this rate, she could be discharged within 2 weeks. Limited contact, of course, but she could finally come home. Home. The word held new meaning now. Chicago had transformed from a refuge into a true home, filled with love and support from their chosen family. Even Arthur had found his place in their new normal, his commitment to therapy and personal growth allowing him to be the father Emma needed, even from a distance. "Mom?" Emma's sleepy voice called from her bed. Can we read the superhero story again? Elizabeth settled beside her daughter, opening the book that documented their journey in child-friendly terms. As she read about brave heroes and the power of working together, she felt the truth of their own story, how crisis had broken their old life apart, but led them to build something stronger, something that put Emma's needs truly first. The spring sunshine painted Chicago's skyline in shades of promise as Elizabeth read. In her sleep, Emma smiled, one hand clutching her beloved rabbit while the other held the book that told her story. On the dedication page beneath the official text, Catherine had added a personal note in her rainbow ink. Sometimes the strongest superheroes are the smallest ones, and sometimes the best families are the ones we build together, one brave moment at a time. Outside Emma's room, the hospital continued its eternal rhythm of hope and healing. Madison walked past with her mother, both stopping to wave at their sleeping friend. Michael prepared for his shift change, updating the next nurse about his favorite patient's progress. Mrs. Chen arrived with fresh flowers, their sweet scent a reminder that spring brought new beginnings. And in this quiet moment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully while their extended family kept gentle vigil, Elizabeth finally felt the last pieces of their new life fall into place. They had faced the storm and emerged stronger, not just surviving, but building something beautiful from the chaos. Emma would grow up surrounded by love, supported by a family that extended far beyond blood ties, and carrying within her the strength she had discovered in her darkest moments. The superhero story had turned out to be real after all, not with capes and masks, but with bone marrow matches and late-night hospital vigils, with blue-haired aunts and faithful grandfathers, with dedicated nurses and reformed fathers, with creative best friends and wise neighbors. These were the real superheroes, and this was their greatest victory, the healing of not just a little girl's body, but of an entire family's heart. If you had to choose between protecting someone you love and maintaining a comfortable life, what would matter most to you? Elizabeth faced this exact dilemma when she left her affluent life in New York to save Emma. What would you have done in her position? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.